Questions 15 through 23 are based on the following passages. So let me just see if I can crank out all those questions in just one video. Okay, cloning is the creation of a new individual from the unique DNA or genetic information of another. The successful cloning of a sheep named Dolly in 1997 sparked a debate over the implications of cloning humans. Each of the passages below was written in 1997. Okay, so there's two passages written by two different authors, and obviously they're going to have different perspectives about this cloning debate. Cloning creates serious issues of identity and individuality. The cloned person may experience concerns about his or her distinctive identity, not only because the person will be in genotype, genetic makeup, and appearance identical to another human being, but in this case because he or she may also be a twin to the person who is the father or mother, if one can still call him that. What would be the psychic burdens of being called a child or parent of your twin? The cloned individual, moreover, will be saddled with a genotype that has already lived. He or she will not fully be a surprise to the world. Okay, so this paragraph is talking about all the harmful effects of the clone itself. So let's just write clone. Can you see this? I don't know how to make it. I'm just going to write clone bad beside it to remember what it's about. People will likely always compare a clone's performance in life with that of the original. True, a cloned person's nurture and circumstances in life will be different. Genotype is not exactly destiny. Still, one must also expect parental and other efforts to shape this new life after the original, or at least view the child with the original vision always firmly in mind. Why else would they clone from the star basketball player, mathematician, and beauty queen, or even the old dad in the first place? So, lots of comparisons. Let's just write, I'm just going to put comp dot. Since the birth of Dolly, there has been a fair amount of doublespeak on this matter of genetic identity. Experts have rushed in to reassure the public that the clone would in no way be the same person or have any confusion about his or her identity. They are pleased to point out that the clone or film star Julia Roberts would not be Julia Roberts. Fair enough. But one is shortchanging the truth by emphasizing additional importance of the environment, rearing, and social setting. Genotype obviously matters plenty. That, after all, is the only reason to clone, whether human beings or sheep. The odds that clones of basketball Larry Bird will play basketball are, I submit, definitely greater than they are for clones of jockey Willie Shoemaker. Okay, so that's the passage. So this last passage serves as like a rebuttal to people who say that cloning is good. So let me just write rebuttal here. Also, they're saying that these people who say cloning is good, defend that nurture plays a huge role, but the author of this passage is saying that if that's the case, then why would you clone in the first place? Because you're cloning for the genotype, so you're claiming that nurture plays a huge role, but by the very fact of cloning, you're saying that the nature or the nature or the genes or the genotype matters a lot too. So yes, let's read passage 2. Given all the brouhaha, which means like hubbub or the debate, you'd think it was crystal clear why cloning human beings is unethical. But what exactly is wrong with it? What would a clone be? Well, he or she would be a complete human being who happens to share the same genes with another person. Today we call such people identical twins. To my knowledge, no one has argued that twins are immoral. You should treat all clones like you would treat monozygous identical twins or triplets, concludes Dr. H. Tristram Engelhardt, a professor of medicine at Baylor and a philosopher at Rice University. That's it. It would be unethical to treat a human clone as anything other than a human being. So that person is mentioned because they have some sort of authority about this field and they're a licensed doctor, so that's a lot of authority. Some argue that the existence of clones would undermine the uniqueness of being a human being. Can individuality, identity, and dignity be severed from genetic distinctiveness and from belief in a person's open future? Asks political thinker George Will. Will and others have fallen under the sway of what one might call genetic essentialism, the belief that genes almost completely determine who a person is. But a person who is a clone would live in a very different world from that of his or her genetic predecessor. With greatly divergent experiences, their brains would be wired differently. After all, even twins who grow up together are separate people, distinct individuals with unique personalities, and certainly no lack of will's individuality, identity, and dignity. But what about cloning exceptional human beings? George Will put it this way: suppose a clone of basketball star Michael Jordan at age 8 preferred violin to basketball. Is it imaginable? If so, would it be tolerable to the cloner? Yes, it is imaginable, and the cloner would just have to put up with violin recitals. Kids are not commercial property. Overzealous parents regularly push their children into sports, music, and dance lessons, but given the stubborn nature of individuals, those parents rarely manage to make kids stick forever to something they hate. A ban on cloning wouldn't abolish pushy parents. So this person is saying that the individuality, the uniqueness of people doesn't diminish with a clone. So this person is basically, the person's not actively advocating for cloning, but is basically saying that opposing a fundamental reason why opposers of cloning oppose, if that makes sense. So this is a counter argument to people who argue against cloning. So against cloning opponents. And the passage above was just a cloning opponent, so let's just write that too. It's really important to write this stuff because these quick comments beside a passage will help you recall what you were thinking at the time of writing it. So the authors of both passages agree that, okay, so this is a kind of a holistic question, which means that you can't answer this question by reading the passage a million times and look for a specific phrase in it. You just kind of have to have the gist of the passage in mind when you answer this question. So let's just look at the choices. The genetic characteristics alone cannot determine a person's behavior. That is something, actually let me just read the other choices. A formal code of ethical rules will be needed once human beings can be cloned. They have not mentioned any codes of any sorts. People who are cloned from others may have greater professional opportunities. Nope. Identical twins and triplets could provide useful advice to people related through cloning. No. They mention triplets and twins in different ways. Cloning humans is a greater technological challenge than cloning sheep. Okay, so A is the correct choice because they both use this argument to defend and oppose cloning. Let's look at question 16. In line 13 of the author of passage 1 uses the word true to indicate. So let's look at line 13. People will likely always compare a clone's performance in life with that of the original. True. A cloned person's nurture and circumstances in life will be different. Genotype is not exactly destiny. Still, one must expect. Okay, so this true is a concession or she's admitting she or he, I don't know the author's gender, but the author of this passage is people always compare a clone's performance in life with that of the original. True. Let's look at the choices. Use the word true to indicate acknowledgement that the passage opening arguments are tenuous. Let's look up what tenuous means. I believe it means tedious. Very weak or slight? Nope. In fact, I think it's the opposite. That they're fairly strong. Recognition of a potential counter-argument. Conviction about the accuracy of the facts presented. Distrust of those who insist on pursuing cloning research. No, this is just a completely overstatement. Certainly that cloning will one day become commonplace. Nope. Okay, so it's the correct answer is B, and it's because if you just think about how you would read this, people will always compare a clone's performance in life with that of the original. True, a cloned person's nurture and circumstances will be different. Genotype is not exactly destiny. Still, one must also expect. So, she concedes to the she concedes that this argument made by people who support cloning is true, but then she moves right on past that, so that's why. That's the correct choice. Line 17, the question in lines 18 through 20, why else first place chiefly serves to, so 18 through 20. Still, one must also expect parental and other efforts to shape this new life after the original, or at least to view the child with the original vision always firmly in mind. Why else then would they clone from the star basketball player, mathematician, and beauty queen, or even dear old dad in the first place? So what they're saying is, the people who support cloning will say, even though they have the same genotype, they're grown up in different environments, and therefore they're not the same person. But the author of this passage is saying is, that might be true, but why would you clone a person in the first place? Probably because you want some sort of semblance to the original, and you, going through this extensive process, you would probably want to clone the most prized human beings, the one with the most, quote-unquote, talent, basketball players, musicians, artists, movie actors, and so forth. So, let's look at the question. Why that question being asked serves to suggest that some issues are not easily resolved, argue for the importance of parents in the lives of children, offer an anecdote revealing the flaw in a popular misconception, imply that cloning might displace more familiar means of reproduction, just the value perceived in a person who might be selected for cloning. So E is the correct choice. But let me explain why it is the correct choice. I think it's easier to understand these sort of passages if you think about them as people having a conversation or people speaking in real life, because then you can pick up on all these nuances and fluctuations in people's voices and understand what they're truly feeling if they're human beings, but somehow it's not as easily understood or conveyed on paper. So if you just imagine people talking when you're reading these passages, I think that really helps, or at least helps me. People will always compare a clone's performance in real life of that of the original. True, a cloned person's nurture and circumstances in life will be different. Genotype is not exactly destiny. Still, one must also expect parental and other efforts to shape this new life after the original, or view it with the original vision. Why else would they clone from the star basketball player, mathematician, beauty queen, or even dear old dad in the first place? So this question is being asked, why in the first place? Because it's a powerful device to point out the hypocrisy and saying that genotype is not everything. Because if genotype is not everything, then why are you so adamant in cloning the genotype in the first place? And they mention basketball player and beauty queen or mathematician because all those people have special talents, and so you would want to clone those people with special talents because you would hopefully want to get more talent out of them. So that it's just suggesting the motivation in cloning someone in the first place. The value perceived in a person, the talent, or what they can bring out in the world might be selected for cloning, yes. And line 21, fair most likely means, so let's look at line 21. Since the birth of Dolly, there has been a fair amount of doublespeak on this matter of genetic identity. So, in this case, fair doesn't mean like fair-skinned or fairly judged tournament, but it actually means a fairly great deal or a large amount. So, fair most likely means considerable, pleasing, ethical. No, even though fair in other contexts means ethical. No, not here, not just. Promising, nope. Considerable is the correct choice. The author of passage 1 mentions 2 sports stars in lines 31 to 33 in order to. That, after all, is the only reason to clone, whether human beings or sheep. The odds that clones of basketball star Larry Bird will play basketball are, I submit, infinitely greater than they are for clones of jockey Willie Shoemaker. So the author mentions these 2 basketball players because she's trying to point out that people are going to only clone people who have some sort of value. And so a legend of the game, Larry Bird, is going to be there's going to be a greater want or need to clone the legend of the game, Larry Bird, than some no-name basketball player, Willie Shoemaker, for all the reasons the author mentioned before. So let's just look at. The author mentions these 2 sports stars in order to argue against genetic analysis of any sports star's physical abilities. Nope. Distinguish between lasting fame and mere celebrity. Nope. Guess she mentioned the fame of the 2 basketball players is mentioned, but not to highlight their fame, but to point out a larger point. Clarify the crucial role of rigorous, sustained training. Nope. That's just stretching the truth, if you want to stretch the truth. Highlight the need for greater understanding of athletes' genetic data. Suggest that athletes' special skills have a genetic component. Let's read the more of the sentences before, because I think I might have missed something. But one is shortchanging the truth by emphasizing the additional importance of the environment. Let's read. Since the birth of Dolly, there has been a fair amount of doublespeak of genetic identity. Experts have rushed in to reassure the public that the clone would in no way be the same person or have any confusions about his or her identity. They are pleased to point out that the clone of film star Julia Roberts will not be Julia Roberts. Fair enough. But one is shortchanging the truth by emphasizing additional importance of the environment, rearing and social setting. Genotype obviously matters plenty. Let's highlight this. That, after all, is the only reason to clone in the first place. Whether human beings or sheep, the odds that clones of basketball star Larry Bird will play basketball are, I submit, infinitely greater than the clones are for. Okay, so the author is understands the importance of. The author's not undermining genes. Actually, it's quite the opposite. It's E. The choice is E. Because among the 2 choices, genes is an answer, but E suggests that the skill, their innate ability that we might suggest that is due to practice or the environment that the author mentions here is that one is shortchanging the truth by emphasizing the additional importance of the environment. But, in fact, genotype actually matters a lot. So, what people who say that nurture plays a huge role are undermining the importance of genes, and that the clones of basketball star Larry Bird are infinitely greater that he's going to play basketball because maybe the fact that he's so good at basketball or he wants to play basketball is somehow embedded in his DNA. Okay, let's look at the future, other questions. In lines 49, open most nearly means, so let's read the passage because you're not going to get these questions by just without looking at the context. Some argue that the existence of clones would undermine the uniqueness of each human being. Can individuality, identity, and dignity be severed from genetic distinctiveness and from a belief in a person's open future? Asks, political thinker George Will. So open future means a future with unlimited possibilities, if not potential. So the future would be somehow limited either by the parental pressure or the people cloning them in the first place, but that's what open means. So let's go to the choices. Open means overt. No, that's frank, unrestricted, unprotected, public, unrestricted. It's a correct choice. In lines 55, divergent experiences emphasizes which of the following is particularly important for a developing child. In lines what? Sorry, I forgot. 55. Asks political thinker George Will. Will and others have fallen under the sway of what might call genetic essentialism, the belief that genes almost completely determine who a person is, but a person who is a clone would live in a very different world from that of his or her genetic predecessor. With greatly divergent experiences, their brains would be wired differently. After all, even twins who grow up together are separate people, distinct individuals with different personalities, and certainly no lack of Will's individuality, identity, and dignity. So divergent experiences. Okay, so what emphasizes divergent experiences emphasize which of the following is particularly important for a developing child? The character? Nope. Heritage? Nope. Environment. That's what the divergent experiences means. We can even go back and prove that. Because after all, even twins who grow up together are separate people, because even though the twins grow up in the same quote-unquote environment, they have different personalities and they go through life differently. So even twins who have the same physical environment, for the most part, still have some differences. Wait, actually, sorry. I just lied. But a person who is a clone would live a very different world from that of his or her genetic predecessor. With greatly divergent experiences, their brains would be wired differently. After all, in twins who grow up in the same environment are separate people, distinct individuals with different personalities, and certainly no lack of wills. Okay, so I just lied. So let's just erase these choices. They mention the twins because they grow up in the same environment, but they have different experiences because they have different personalities. So this divergent experience is supposed to emphasize how important personalities play. So personality is the correct choice. Nothing about intelligence, nothing about heritage, nothing about character. Personality. In the quotation in lines 61 through 64, George Will primarily draws attention to. So 61 through 64. But what about cloning exceptional human beings? George Will put it this way. Suppose a clone of basketball star Michael Jordan, age 8, preferred violin to basketball. Is it imaginable? If so, would it be tolerable to the cloner? So, and again, this question is a very powerful question. Draws attention to a weakness inherent in cloning theory. Nope. A goal that some advocates of cloning might share. The limitations of human individuality, the likelihood that children will rebel against their parents, the extent to which a cloned person might differ from the original person. So let's read beyond that quote. Yes, it is very imaginable because, like I said, people have different personalities, and the cloner would just have to put up with it. Kids are not commercial property. So it's trying to draw the attention to the extent which a cloned person might differ from the original person, because the cloned person of Michael Jordan, which everyone thinks would play basketball, might just have a different personality and might be more prone to taking up other interests. Both passages base their arguments on the unstated assumption that, so this is a holistic question. Like, you cannot read the passages 10 times over and look for a specific quote or phrase. You just have to understand the gist of both passages. Both passages base their arguments on the unstated assumption that genetic distinctiveness is crucial to human survival as a species. Public concern for human cloning will eventually diminish. This is just, nope. Human cloning is a genuine possibility in the future. Individualism is less prized today than it has been in the past. They mention how important individualism is, but they don't really compare it to the past. Technological advances have had a mostly positive impact on society. Okay. So C is the correct choice, and it's because they mention this genetic distinctiveness a bunch of times, but they never mention or suggest that it is what increases humans' fitness or survival rate. So this is just not a correct choice, and I'll explain why C is a good choice. It's because they mention all these concerns of cloning because they understand how realistic a possibility it is that cloning could become a norm in the future. And so they're discussing all these opinions of opponents and proponents of cloning to enlighten the readers of the different perspectives on cloning. Yes, so we just answered all the questions for this passage.